Hello, everybody. I haven't really been making videos too much lately. Let's be real. It's been over a year. I kind of got burned out, to be honest, on the whole video making thing. I put a lot of time into some videos, and there was a lot of editing involved, and ultimately I burned myself out. I decided to do videos that are a little more simple, just talking to a camera like this. And I want to just talk about topics that I'm interested in, that I'm learning a lot about, that I'm watching videos on, I'm reading books on, listening to podcasts, and just sort of trying to formulate my own thoughts on some of these really big topics. I teach biology, I teach environmental science, I've taught physiology, anatomy and physiology. Life and science are connected for me. I'm a very rational person. I think in scientific ways. I believe the scientific method is the best way to figure out truths about the world. So the scientific method is extremely important to me. But as I've gotten older, I've leaned into more philosophy. And I think science and philosophy are connected. I think a lot of things that we do philosophically can be better understood by applying a scientific lens to those thoughts. Today, I'm going to start with what I think is at the bottom of almost everything else that comes after it. So all of the things we talk about in terms of society, right? Laws, punishments, rewards, how we interact with other people, how we sympathize with other people, the way we treat other people, the way we think about other people. It can boil down to something, what I call bedrock, which is the bottom, right? You keep digging down, like, what about this? What about this? And when you get down to it, I think it all comes down to mostly free will. And so over the last couple of years, I've been reading a lot, I've been listening to a lot, I've been thinking a lot about free will. I mean, actually, this is not for the last few years. If you go back to when I was early 20s, right? I was just a young kid in college. I got into a little bit of thinking about philosophical stuff, and it was at that point that I basically got the idea that, okay, free will is something that is an intuition that we all have, right? We all think free will exists, and we believe it. We have this sort of sense that we could do otherwise, that we make our own decisions. We choose our own paths. If I were to go back in time, I could have done otherwise. I could have chose this or that. I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true. And so I want to just lay out my case for why I think there is no free will. Why you could not have done anything other than what you've done to get you where you are. You had no other option. I use a variety of sources, but I think the most influential source that I've read and that I know about comes from who I would regard as one of the most important thinkers of our time, one of the most important thinkers of all time, and somebody who's vastly underappreciated, underknown right now, although he's relatively known in certain circles, and who's someone who I think will be one of those people that's remembered for history. In history, rather, like people will remember this person. His name will become synonymous with this time period, and some of his thoughts are way ahead. And it's a scientist, philosopher, thinker. His background is philosophy and neuroscience, and his name is Sam Harris. If you don't know who Sam Harris is, look him up, watch some of the videos. He's a well-known thinker, and everything he says, I kind of agree with. It's weird. The way his brain works and his thought process just jive with mine. And so a lot of what I base my thoughts off are stemming from some of the thoughts that he has. And in particular, there's one book. It's called Freewill. This book, if you look at it, look how thin that is. This book is 66 pages. 66 pages. You read this, I don't believe that you can come away believing we have free will anymore. I really don't. I think this is probably one of the most important books I've ever read. I think if you want to challenge yourself on your thoughts about free will and challenge your intuitions, this book will do that. So I highly recommend you read it. So most of what I'm going to say now is coming from the arguments that is made here by Sam Harris in this book, Free Will. Just to summarize, in the end, the idea is that free will is an illusion that we feel like we have, but in fact, we do not have free will, meaning we could not have chose otherwise. We could not do anything different than what we did do. We could not have ended up in any different circumstances than we ended up in. And ultimately, we do not have control over the decisions we make. The important thing to first understand is just to take a moment right now to just in your own head reflect on the fact that you cannot control the thoughts that are appearing to you. So the next thought that pops into your head, you didn't decide that that thought was going to come up. That thought appears. It appears essentially out of nowhere, out of thin air. You have no control over whether that thought appeared or did not appear. You don't generate your thoughts consciously. They're generated subconsciously. So if you're just sitting there and then a thought appears, that is completely inscrutable to you, meaning you have no idea where that thought came from, why it arose. So for example, think of a place in the world that starts with the letter A. Okay, Alabama. Why did you think of Alabama? Why did Alabama appear to you? Why didn't Arkansas appear to you? Why didn't Antarctica appear to you? You had a variety of different things that could have appeared to you, but it was Alabama that popped into your head. That's important to start with, right? The idea that you cannot control your own thoughts. Even a small decision like just picking a location that starts with A is almost out of your control. All these different places that start with A could appear, but you're not controlling that appearance, the appearance of the thought. Now, yes, you can control what you say because you can think in your head, things appear, and then you can select amongst them. Now, the question is, are you really selecting amongst them? So let's say you go, okay, Alabama pops in, but you don't say it immediately. Arkansas pops up, Antarctica pops up, and now you have these different A places popping up. And then you decide to say Alabama. Why did you decide to say Alabama instead of Arkansas? Now that choice, the reason you chose one over the other, is also inscrutable to you. You don't know why you chose Arkansas or Alabama or Antarctica. You don't know what the reason behind it was. Now, just to sort of lay out a counter argument to that, someone might say something like, well, I chose Alabama because I recently visited there. Okay, fair enough. That could be an approximate reason why Alabama popped into your head as opposed to some other place. There's some connection in your life to that place, and that made it arise. Fair enough. That doesn't mean that you had control over choosing Alabama, right? Let's say you went to Alabama a week ago, and then I asked you this question. Alabama was going to appear to you completely out of your control. You could not suppress Alabama coming up in your mind. It came up completely out of your control. Now, the reason it came up might be because you were there recently, and so there's a connection. But the appearance of the thought of Alabama is out of your control. You do not get to decide which thoughts appear and which do not appear. That is kind of the crux of the beginning of this. It's just the recognition that you are not the author, as Sam Harris would say, the author of your thoughts. They appear subconsciously. You do not get to decide what thought appears and what thought does not appear. Another observation that might help you get to this point of realizing that you don't have control over your thoughts really is when you talk, right? So right now I'm speaking to you. I'm generating a sentence. Each word comes after the next, and I don't know which word is going to appear until it appears, right? Because I'm speaking, my speech and my thoughts are essentially synchronous right now. So as a word comes into my head, it comes out of my mouth. I have no idea which word is going to come next, but it's just flowing. I really am not controlling what word appears and what I am saying. So the word that I'm going to end this sentence on, I don't know what it's going to be, but there's going to be a word in which I end this sentence on. And it was on, but I don't know why. I have no idea why I went down that path of words. They just appeared and they came out. I wasn't selecting them. I wasn't deciding. So that entire sentence, every sentence I say, is completely a mystery to me. I don't know how I get to the end of a sentence, but I do. Free will, as we define it classically, is the ability to choose, essentially, to have done differently, right? Meaning, I chose to do that, but I could have done something different, right? That's, I think, the way most people would define free will, is this idea that I could have done something differently. Now, every decision you quote unquote make has to come from some thought, right? Some conscious thought that you then choose to do. If you cannot control the thoughts that appear to you, how can you then control the decision that are based off those thoughts? I'm thinking like, okay, I want some tea right now. Do I want green tea or, black tea? I got green and black. What do I want? I choose green. I choose green tea. Someone might say, well, I chose green tea because I prefer green tea. I like green tea more than I like black tea. So you're choosing green tea because you have a preference for green tea. Well, why do you have a preference for green tea over black tea? Why do you like green tea more than black tea? Then someone might say, well, I was raised, our household had green tea, and we didn't really have black tea, so I just grew up enjoying green tea more because that's what I was exposed to, and it just sort of, part of my culture or my family tradition. Did you choose your culture and family tradition? No, I was just born into it. Okay, so you didn't choose that. So you can see where I'm going, right? You just keep going back. You keep going back, right? So even though I'm choosing green tea to drink right now, if I trace that line back, I will eventually get to what I call bedrock, or a certain point in which the decision was not mine. So the decision that I feel like I'm making right now is actually based off of something in the past that I did not choose. If you fast forward that, it was inevitable that I was going to choose green tea, and I could not have done differently, right? The only way I could have done differently was if I had a different upbringing or a different genetic background. But of course, that would make me a different person. The idea here is that ultimately we don't really control all of the things that matter for the generation of our thoughts, and ultimately are just decisions we make based off of those thoughts. My beliefs, my thoughts, the way I act is based off of really only two things. It's genetics and environment, right? So I'm born with a certain set of genes that everyone would agree, you have no choice over the genes that you inherit, right? So you have a sperm and egg. Meiosis has generated a completely new combination of genes in the sperm and a completely new combination of genes and alleles in the egg. Sperm and egg fuse. Now I have me, the starting of me, and it has a set of genes that I never chose. And that's completely random. So I didn't choose my genetics. I'm born into a family, into a culture, into a location. Again, no choice of my own. I'm exposed to experiences, to friends, to family, all without me choosing it. Now, of course, as we age, we feel like we take on more and more and more control, right? I can start to choose the people I hang out with. I can start to choose the locations I go to. I can choose where to move. I can choose the different cultures I want to live in and experience. But then the question is, okay, so why do you choose those friends? As you get older, why do you make these decisions? You don't know why you make those decisions, right? Because it's all coming from the initial bedrock of things you didn't choose. So I think a lot of what we attribute to free will is actually just the illusion of free will that leads us into this sort of weird position where if we really analyze the decisions we make, we actually have to admit that we really don't know why we made those decisions. Or if we think we know why, if we trace it back far enough, we get to a point of something that wasn't in our control that would lead us to those decisions. So I am where I am right now at this current moment. I am making a video on free will. You could say that my entire life has led up to this point. I had no choice but to make this video. I could not have done anything different. So the idea would be like, okay, if you, as the viewer watching this, were to be put in my exact same position from the start, you had the same genes as me, you were raised in the same situation as I was. If you were to then say you would not be right here giving this little discussion, like talking about free will right now, like you would have done something different, I would put it to you to say, well, what else is there that would have led to you doing something different? If you had the same genes, the same environment as I did, but you're willing to say that you could have ended up in a different position than I am right now, what else is there that would put you in a different position? One thing you might say is, well, luck, right? Well, there's random events that might have happened to me differently than you. Okay, well, sure, then that's a different reality. Then we're talking about a different reality because that's different. But my point is, if you live the exact same life, you're born with the same genes as I am, you live the exact same life that I do, all of the events that happen to me happen to you, what else is there that would have made you different than me? And the answer is one of two things. Either there is nothing that's different, and therefore we don't have free will, or there is some other thing that we have. And some people like to throw in the word soul. There's a soul. There's something that's not genetic and not environmental, and that's what gives us our free will. The problem I have with that is there's no evidence to support the fact that there's some other thing. There's a soul or some non-physical part of us that plays this sort of like free will role. There's no evidence for that, right? And as a scientific person, as someone who believes in the scientific method, there's no evidence for that. There's just no evidence for this soul kind of thing. And so ultimately, you end up in a position where you either say, I'm going to believe in something without evidence, or I will have to kind of admit that there's no free will. This is a hot debated topic in philosophy. I've looked at a lot of it. I've heard about the compatibilist views. I've heard about the religious side of it. Nothing is as compelling and convincing to me as the argument purported by my boy, Sam Harris, okay? So let me get back to what I started with at the beginning, where I said why I think this is the most important bedrock idea that influences how we make laws, how we punish people, how we reward people, right? Most of society is based off of the thought that everyone has free will. Pretty much everything that we do is based off of the idea that individuals have free will and therefore can be held accountable for bad things they do and can be held in high regard for good things they do. But if it is true, as I believe, and as I've tried to show, that free will does not exist, that it's just an illusion, then how can we justify punishing people or rewarding people, right? Because they could not have done otherwise. Sam Harris, again, has a good example in the book of a person who does something terrible, right? They break into the house and they kill people in the house. Okay. By all intents and purposes, people would go, that is a bad person. We need to punish them. Now, what if I told you that that person had a brain tumor? It was pushing, in their brain in a certain way that led to them acting impulsively in a way that they would not have done otherwise had the brain tumor not been there. So if you remove the brain tumor, they would not have done that. I think most of us would then sympathize with that person and be like, wow, that was not their decision. So we should not punish them in the same way as a person who did not have that brain tumor. But I want to push you. So the brain tumor is a pretty obvious case, but the way Sam Harris describes it is it's tumors all the way down, in the sense that even if a person doesn't have a brain tumor, the tumor is not there, but the tumor is represented by all of the things that their genetics, their life experiences, things that they didn't control led them up to that point. Meaning, even if they didn't have a tumor, they still could not control where they ended up. They were going to get to that point regardless because of their genetics and their upbringing and their experiences. So if you were to put yourself in the same place of that criminal, you could not have done otherwise because you have their genes, you have their upbringing, you're experiencing all the same things they experienced. If you were to somehow put yourself on a high horse and say, well, if I was in that person's shoes, I wouldn't have done that. That is a blatant lie that you need to sort of square in your own head, right? Like, that there's no way you could have done differently. Unless you're purporting that there's some sort of intangible soul-like thing that you have that they don't have. So then you're making a moral judgment on that person. You're saying, well, I have a soul that would never allow me to do such a bad thing. And that person has a soul that's not so good, that allows them to do those kinds of things. Therefore, I'm a better person and we should punish that person. If you're willing to say that, be careful. Be careful saying something like that. You're getting into territory of moral judgments. Okay? And I think we need to be very careful when we start judging people at a moral level. Does this mean that we should not punish anybody or not lock people up or use jails or anything like that? No, that doesn't change. Here's the thing. It doesn't really change a lot of the structures we have in place, because if someone has the predisposition even to do harm, to hurt people, to do criminal acts, or to infringe on the rights of other people, we still need to put those people in a position where they can't do that, meaning in jail. If they had no choice, right, to do what they did, punishment isn't really the thing to do, right? In fact, we need to try and rehabilitate, if anything. If we can change them, that's step one, right? If we can change them, awesome. But if we can't change them, then we still need to lock them up forever because they are going to hurt other people. So regardless of whether or not you can assign blame to the person, it doesn't change the fact that we would still need to lock them up. So I don't want people coming away from this video going, oh, I think criminals, I'm being very empathetic with criminals, and that people should just be able to do what they want because they don't have any control over it. No, of course not. Of course not. That's not what I'm saying. So if I had to wrap all this up, I think one of the most important things to consider here is that all success and lack of success all come down to luck in the end, unfortunately. It gives you more empathy, gives you more sympathy for people who are in positions that they're in. So if a person is, not doing so well, they're not well educated, they're not able to sustain a job, maybe they have addiction issues and their life isn't so great and they're suffering because of it, it makes you way more empathetic because now you understand, well, they didn't really choose that life. And of course they didn't choose that life. Who would choose that life? It makes you more sympathetic. And the thing I hate the most that I think that the belief in free will leads to is it leads to a lot of people who find themselves in privileged positions, judging those who are not as in privileged positions and saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Come on. I did it. Look where I'm at. Look at all that I've achieved. I put in the hard work, and they're taking all this credit for their success, and they're assigning blame to individuals who don't have that success. That, to me, is extremely disturbing and has no foundational basis in reality. So the way we treat other people, the way we set up our systems in society, all of these things that we do in society when we interact with others, not just one-on-one with how we think about other people, how we sort of sympathize or empathize with other people, but also the laws that we set up, the criminal justice system. All of these things are connected to the belief that we have free will. Now, a lot of things won't change in society, but it will decrease the amount of moral high horsing, right? This sort of moral superiority that people put on. Like, I am so successful because I busted my butt. To me, I think it's a lot of false showboating that has no basis in reality. Overall, for me, having come to this conclusion, and reading Sam Harris's book and kind of now where I'm at with this thought, it's made me a much more sympathetic person. It really has. I look at people who have it worse than me, and I feel empathy, and I don't assign blame. I look at those as people who had unlucky streaks. They were either born with an unlucky set of genetics, or they were born in an unlucky circumstance and environment. And I look at people with a lot of success, and I think they had a lucky streak. It would help everyone be a little more kind, maybe more generous. The mentality of people looking down on other people in a moral way is really, really toxic to our society, to the interactions between people. And I think it is what drives a lot of conflict, and it drives a lot of hatred, right? You can't really, and here's the thing, you can't really hate somebody if you know they are the way they are due to luck and not because they have some sort of free will that they chose to go down that path. So it kind of reduces your hate. You just kind of sit back and you think, you know what, everyone is exactly where they were going to be. No one chose to be where they are. And hey, here we all are. Let's now go forward and think about ways that as a community and as a society, we can make things more equitable and push forward to decrease the suffering and increase the well-being of everybody. The first step to that is opening up the door of free will and realizing it's an illusion. And once that illusion is wiped away, I think we can make a lot of progress in a lot of different realms. This is not something that's going to change overnight for you. You might start thinking like, I really do feel like I make my own decisions. And of course you do. You really do feel that way. It feels like you make your own decision. Like, oh my God, I made that decision, right? And you want to take credit for your accomplishments. And you can still do that. You can still be proud of your achievements. You can still say, I put in hard work. But remember, why are you a hard worker? You have a certain set of genes maybe that lend you to hard work. Or you were brought up in a family that praised hard work and established hard work as an important component. If it's new to you, I hope I didn't scare you too much. I hope this isn't too much of a bolt breaker, but I think in the end, it's something that's really valuable. And so if you disagree with me, if you really disagree with me, or even if you agree with me, if you have anything to say about this is a topic that I am really interested in. I'm fascinated by it. And if you have anything to say, please comment. If you disagree with me, especially, I would like to hear different arguments, because I am extremely open to changing my mind. If something is convincing to me and the evidence is supporting of it, I will immediately change my mind. I am not stubborn on my beliefs. I've changed my thoughts on so many things in my life because I've heard new evidence, compelling evidence. So if you can bring something that changes my mind, please do it. If you agree with me, that's awesome. Let me know why. But yeah, I think I'll do more of these kinds of videos in the future. I hope this isn't too boring. I know it's just me sitting here talking about philosophical ideas in front of the camera. But this is the way my brain works. These are the things I like to think about. And so I hope there's some people out there that also do the same. And let me know if you are. All right. Peace, everybody.